Morag Thung, Earthlets, and welcome to another episode of the 2000 AD Thrillcast. 2 episodes in a row. Tharg is really spoiling us. Thank you very much for the lovely feedback about the return of the Thrillcast. And if you've not listened to our last episode with a whole host of people, Rachel Bowa and Zach Quaintance, and our new host, Steve Morris, talking about 2000 AD in general, but then Rob Williams, Arthur Wyatt, and Henry Flint talking about A Better World, which is wrapping up as I record this. And if you're not reading 2000 AD at the moment, and specifically Judge Dredd, I mean, you know what? You're missing out full stop, because absolutely killer lineup at the moment. Dredd's doing fantastic. You got Thistlebone. Seriously, if you are a lapsed reader or a non-reader and just like listening to this podcast, then I really recommend you pick up this year's Frogs, just because, everything's on fire. It's wonderful. The good fire. On this episode, the return of long-form interviews with comic book creators. Simon Harrison is somebody that I have been hoping to talk to ever since the podcast started in 2015. If you don't know who Simon is, his work blazed very brightly in the 80s and 90s as part of one of the new wave of artists who came in after, I guess, the British invasion. So, like, what you'd consider the classic creators had moved on to American comics. In 2000 AD was very much on a constant search for new talent, and Simon came along to do a couple of Future Shocks, and then Bradley, which, if you don't know what Bradley is, unfortunately it's not available in collection at the moment, though I do ask about it an awful lot. It was basically, I guess, a spiritual successor to DR and Quinch, by Alan Moore and Alan Davis. How to describe Bradley? Just a complete tearaway child, puerile, scatological, mad, and all of it kind of accentuated by Simon's very, 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 I hesitate to use the word unique, but it was a unique style. He was an artist on Strontium Dog, on the kind of lead up to the final solution, and the death of Johnny Alpha, and then he worked on a series called Revere with writer John Smith, and Revere is one of my favorite things to ever appear in 2000 AD. Kind of cross between, well, it's if Francis Bacon had a psychedelic nightmare and decided to do a comic about it, and then he dropped off the radar. His work was challenging, had its fans and its detractors, but certainly from my point of view as a reader back in the 90s, it was never anything less than interesting, and I loved it. And so it's a real joy to have been able to track him down and get him on the podcast. And thank you to Tom and the gang at Gosh Comics in London for helping facilitate that, because bit of a tick off the old bucket list for the podcast. So a huge, great big long interview with him in this episode, and that's going to be everything from me, really. Like I said, Prog's on fire at the moment. We got some fun news coming up, which should be. I can't really be any less oblique than that. We looking ahead to what's coming on the podcast. We have our tribute with a tribute to John Burns, who passed away at the end, very tail end of last year, and we will be talking to Sean Phillips, who's a big fan, Robbie Morrison, who worked with him on Nikolai Dante, also Tim Quinn, who worked with him on and off for many years, and Paul Duncan, who knew John and had talked to him a lot and is writing a book about him. So that'll be a fantastic panel discussion where we look at John's life and work and ask, why why was he so good? A bit of a leading question. And then the episode after that, another long form chat, this time with Liam Sharp, co-creator of PJ Maybe, and a fantastic artist who, sorely missed from the pages of the Galaxy's Greatest comic. So lots coming up from the Galaxy's Greatest podcast over the coming weeks. So please do make sure that you hit subscribe, whether that's on your favorite podcast app or whether it's on YouTube. You can listen to us on 2000ad.com /podcasts. Yeah. Without much further ado, let's talk to Simon Harrison. Like I said, this is a great long chat. We very much dive into what he's been up to since 2000 AD, but also the ethos behind his work and life. And yeah, it was really wonderful to talk to him. So enjoy Earthlets, and we shall see you for another episode of the 2000 AD Thrillcast in a fortnight, 3 in a row. Who would have thought? So until then, hope you stay safe, take care, and splundig verthrig. Like I said, it's such a privilege to be able to talk to you because, I'm a huge fan of your work in 2000 AD in the late 80s and early 90s, and you kind of blazed very brightly at 2000 AD, and then were gone, and it I think for a lot of people it kind of corresponded, particularly towards the end, when a period when 2000 AD was having trouble finding its purpose and its place in the world. And I'm fascinated by your journey, not just in practical terms, like where you were and what you did, but also your artistic journey, your spiritual journey, if that's a word to use.
Is the right word to use.
Yeah, I mean, tell us a bit about where you're from, your background, because you're a London boy, aren't you?
Yeah. I was born in the Brixton area. My dad was Jamaican. My mum was white. They had a lot of problems because of that, because of ignorance and racism. And I feel like it made me question, first of all, intelligence. Why do people behave the way they do when there's no logical or scientific reason that someone should be looked on as inferior because they've got more melanin in their skin? I mean, it's just ludicrous to me, and it always was. And I think that this just it was just a natural inquiry. It was forced on me because of social circumstances. It made me question, first of all, other people, and then myself, obviously, because you can't just point the finger at other people and say, well, this person's like this or this person's like that. You say, well, what am I like? And I think that's the kind of thing. I think that's what's one of the things that sparked my interest in understanding how consciousness functions. I think that because all behavior is just a product of conditioning. It's just circumstances that are forced on children when they're too young to understand. I mean, children are not intrinsically racist. They don't understand that concept at all. It's forced on them by ignorant adults. So obviously it's like the next question is what is conditioning, and then it's not, and then it goes much further than that. It says, why does conditioning do the things it does, and is there a way around it? Because I didn't agree to a lot of it, especially schooling. I mean, it's like a lot of it is appalling. It seems to be systematically designed to destroy creativity and individualism, which is pretty much a psychological attack from the age of 4 on little children. It's completely immoral. So, I mean, by the age of 8, I was completely convinced that there was no way I wanted to earn a living in a job. It was obvious to me that I was being sent to school, to a place I didn't want to go, to learn things I wasn't interested in, and I wasn't being paid. And my parents were getting up in the mornings, arguing and getting the kids ready. And then they were going to work somewhere they didn't want to go, to do what they didn't want to do. And they were getting paid. I thought, so basically I'm being indoctrinated. I mean, I didn't use those words, right? But I knew what was going on at that age. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to find any way I can to get around it. And so at school, I'm without bragging, I'm quite bright. So I was able to memorize the curriculum for, schooling and stuff quite easily. So I left it all to the last minute all the time. And then made friends with all the art teachers. And whenever I had a lesson I didn't like, I just used to Skype off, sit in the art room, and they'd be like, "What are you doing here?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I've got maths." And they'd be like, "You can't do that, it's illegal." And I'd be like, "Yeah, but And they were just glad. I went to such a rough school. They were just glad that I was interested in something, So my schooling was more focused around the creative arts, writing, creative writing, and visual arts, and arithmetic. I mean, no, I'm like dyslexic with numbers. They jump around and do funny dances when I look at them, and anyone says anything with numbers, it goes in one ear and out the other. So that was.
Yeah, I guess also, I mean, Brixton is a place where kind of consciousness of not just things like race, but also of class and the effects of wealth and poverty are quite sharp. So, I mean, what sort of are you a kid of the 70s or the 80s?
I'm from the 60s.
From the 60s. Oh, wow.
I'm way older than I look.
I was just about to say you're looking very good.
No, I've had people comment on that before. It was a problem when I was younger because I would get stopped going into clubs and bars, and they would be like, "Sorry, you're too young," and I'd be like, "Are you kidding? I'm older than you are," and they'd be like, "What?" And I'd have to show ID and stuff like that. And but it's obviously to my advantage as I get older. So, yeah.
I mean, would you have described yourself? Well, would you describe yourself now as having been a rebellious child, or was it just that you?
No, I wasn't rebellious. I was feral. We were sort of. I mean, my parents weren't disorganized or irresponsible.
Yeah.
But I grew up on council estate where you went out. I mean, when you weren't at school, you went out in the day and you came back at night, and no one knew what you were doing. And we just roamed around. We were bored, and we would consume time playing football and stuff like that. But that gets boring after a while. And then it was like, well, what should we do? And it'd be like, oh, well, let's go and fight them over there, or let's go and break some windows, or just for fun. I remember hurling stones at buses and plate glass windows just for fun, and getting chased by vicious adults who wanted their revenge on me. I mean, some of the stuff, when I think back on it, I'm like, that is crazy. First of all, I'm surprised I'm still alive. And that's not an exaggeration. Some of the things that we were doing, and also, let's put it this way: I'm glad that I came of age. I came to a point where I realized it was incredibly antisocial and cruel to do those things, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. So I sort of dropped my friend group, and luckily I moved away from that area to another one. And I don't know, you probably know, as a kid, you have all these, the greatest friends, and then suddenly they're gone, and that's that. You don't ever contact them again, and so it was kind of a situation like that. But my childhood, I would say, I was beholden to no one until I got home, pretty much. And then it was, clean your room or go to bed. You got to get up for school, and it was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But when we were out, no, we were like a little gang of feral hooligans. I apologize publicly to everyone.
Dear people of Brixton, I apologise on behalf.
Yeah.
of myself.
Yeah, Yeah, but that's just childhood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, depending on where you grow up, but for me it was, yeah, absurd sometimes.
Well, I'm interested in therefore the your interest in art as a child, because it can be, I guess, it's one of those things where we're broadly so used to the story being, oh yes, I was really into art at school and everyone encouraged me, and then I went to art school, but that's not your story at all.
No.
It's almost like you chose, this is what I want to do, and I'm gonna stick with
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, my mum says I was drawing since the age of 1. She said before that, I used to sit in my cot or on a blanket, and I used to pick up a toy, and I used to turn it around in my hands, look at it from every angle for so long it used to drive her nuts, and she used to snatch it away and give me another one because it used to bother her. And then I would just do the same with that. So I think I just had an ability to focus my attention on one thing for a long period of time. She said I was very quiet. She never had any problems with me. God, I mean, the other peculiar thing is that when she realized she was pregnant with me, when she found out, a little while after, she started to have the most horrific nightmares every night. And she used to just pace up and down at the end of her bed until she was so exhausted she would fall asleep, right? Now, I didn't know anything about this, but when I started painting all the artwork that I did after I kind of finished Revere, the stuff that you see if you've seen Dogon, I don't know if you've seen it, but
yeah,
when
I'm looking forward to talking to you about it, actually.
Yeah, when I started painting that, and showed my mum, well, I didn't show her. She came to an exhibition that I had in the West End, and she was like, she'd never seen it before. She went, "Oh, that looks like those nightmares I used to have." And I went, "What?" And she went, "Yeah, yeah." My dad went, "Oh my God, yeah, I remember that." And I was like, "What nightmares?" And she said, and then she told me the story that for 6 months until I was born, it stopped when I was born. She had these terrible nightmares, and she said they look like that. And I was like, so what does that mean? Did I bring these nightmares with me? I mean, it's really peculiar, and it kind of showed me that I was on the right track with Dogon in what I was trying to achieve with it, and also that was what the Revere was for. It was just a vehicle to access. I didn't know what I was doing with Revere. I just knew it was the right thing to do, but I knew exactly what I was doing with Dogon, and yeah, and it was. It's just been a really peculiar journey, to be honest, and a lot of it's too weird and personal to talk about. But I mean, some of it I would talk about. But yeah, it's been odd.
I mean, you were friends with John Hicklenton.
Yeah. Johnny actually was the editor of Dogon.
Right.
Unofficially, I used to go and show him what I'd done, and he'd say, "Oh, no, I think you should take that picture out. That's not really in the right place." And I'd be like, "Yeah, he's right." And then he went, "You know what? I want a credit as the editor for this." And I was like, "Okay, fine. So this is it officially right now." This is something people didn't know. Johnny Hicklenton was the editor of Dogon, pretty much.
Okay, so, I brought him up because he talked about being a portal for things. So
yeah,
that was a lovely, sweet chap, and yet the horrors that spewed forth from
yeah.
I guess it's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we discussed that a lot. I don't think he was as comfortable with it as I was.
Right.
Partly because I feel that he had his father was a priest for a while, or was training to be a priest. So his family was kind of like Catholic. Mine wasn't. Although my mum is religious, but she never spoke about it. I never found out until I was like in my late 30s that she was even religious. She never bothered us with it at all, which I think is good. I respect that, that people should be left to decide for themselves. But Johnny had that, I would say, that kind of Catholic guilt thing going on a little bit. And he wasn't. I wouldn't say he was institutionalized in terms of his religious feeling, not at all. He was more into like the like the kind of purity of the teachings of Jesus Christ and stuff like that. Personally, no, I've never been interested in that kind of thing. If I was going to say what my influences were, I'd say they personally motivated. But if I was going to put a label on it, I'd say it's more kind of Buddhist, in that it's about an investigation into the criteria and the function of consciousness, and not just putting my faith in some higher being to sort me out and behaving myself on earth. That for me, that's not enough. It was more to do with how does it work? Why does it work the way it works? What happens when you sweep it away? What's left? Because if you look at if you really look into Buddhism and Eastern mysticism, it's not a process of adding information, it's a process of negation. You look at your life and you say, what is a waste of energy, factually? And then you drop things naturally as a consequence of your investigation until you're left with a conditionless state. That's pretty much how it works. And so, for instance, with Revere, I think instinctively I knew that I had to go in that direction. And Revere was a way of kind of documenting what was going on and having a creative outlet, financing the freedom of time, basically the time I needed. Obviously, every moment you're alive and walking around costs money, which is, as far as I'm concerned, appalling, but it's just true. And so I needed a way of financing that, and being able to make money out of art was like, yeah, well, that's perfect. I like doing it. It's not work. So yeah, I think it just was with Johnny, we had we didn't have superficial conversations ever. I mean, I was with Johnny when he got his letter from Dignitas, right? And he opened the letter, and the form was ripped in half, and he just went, why have they done that? Why would they send me it like that? And I just sat and I watched the realization hit him. They want to see if you're serious. They want you to apply again. And he just was shell-shocked. And I just remember sitting, and that was the last time I saw him. We spoke on the phone after, but that was the last time I saw him. And at one point, he wanted me to go with him. But then he changed his mind because he said it would be too ritualistic. And I was like, yeah, fine. And he asked me, he said, what do you think I should do? He said, my life's degenerating. I'm getting less and less capable of moving. I don't want to end up in a wheelchair with just like a lever to move me around. I just don't want that. And I was like, he said, do you think it's wrong that I'm going to go there and commit suicide? I said, mate, I have not got, there's nothing I can say to you. It's not my business. It's entirely your decision. I don't object, and I can't understand it because I'm not in your situation. All I can say is I'll support you whatever you choose, and that was it. And in the end, he went. Yeah. So he was very, most of the time, very good natured about it. I don't know what he was like at the end, but he was very good humored and very clear about why he was doing it, what he wanted to avoid. And honestly, I don't know why I would do it in this situation.
No idea. We've gone big. We've gone big very quickly.
Oh yeah, I don't like small talk.
But no, it's wonderful because it actually kind of leads me into what I want to talk about, because this kind of childhood interest in art, getting out of maths lessons and going and sitting in the art department at school. Was this part of a process of kind of self-discovery, a journey that led you to comics? Were comics a part of your life
Yeah, I was when I was little, I was reading those, those little commando books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I used to read those, and I was reading Battle comic when that came out, and really big into Pat Mills's Charlie's War. And then when 2000 AD came out, first of all, it was action comic, wasn't it? There was that, which was incredibly violent. I was like, whoa, hook jaw biting people's heads off. And I was like, this is outrageous. How could they do that? And I was like, I've never showed my mum. She would have gone bonkers. But, and then as 2000 AD developed, I was like, I was just naturally flowed into reading it. And I was drawing my own comics, just making them up as I was going along. And then at some point, it's really weird. Like at school, there were all these like careers talks and stuff like that. I don't even remember going to one. Everyone was doing these things, like discussing university and all, and it was completely alien to me. My mind just wasn't on it at all. And I realized now when I look back on it, I was like, well, I was just immature. I wasn't planning a future, and so the only question that went through my head was, how do I get out of doing what I hate for money? I went, I've got to make money drawing. And I was like, well, how'd you do that? And I was like, I don't know. I just didn't have a clue. And then I was like, people knew that I was into art and they were looking at my art and they liked it. And then someone said that they knew a record label and that they needed artwork for like heavy metal bands, and I should go in and show them my portfolio. And I was like, okay. And I just did that, and they just went, yeah, and they gave me work straight away. And I was like, well, I've just earned like 500 quid to just sit and paint. And my mum was like, really? I was like, yeah. She was like, oh, she was really pleased. And that was it. And I thought, well, I can just do that then, can't I? And then I just started just doing that. And then I found my way. No, I wanted to get into comics. I knew I wanted to get into comics, and I didn't know how. And I was like, well, how do you do this? I was like, right, so I'll go where they sell loads of comics. And I was like, Forbidden Planet. Right, so I just went to Forbidden Planet. And I had my portfolio with me, and I went, and I met Win. Do you remember Win? Him at all?
Well before my time at FP.
All right. Well, Win Waycheck, I think his name was. And I just slammed my portfolio on the counter. I went, I want to get into comics. I don't know how, or can you look at this? And he was obviously a total geek. And he was like, yeah. And he was looking at it. He was like, oh, yeah, definitely. You should go to IPC. And I was like, where's that? And he gave me the address. And then he said, there's also a comics production class going on at LCP, London College of Printing, right? So I was like, well, how do you get in? He said, oh, just go. Just go and show them your portfolio. Say that I said, that I suggested you should go there. Ask for Gary Leach. And I was like, because he was mates with Win, right? I was like, oh, okay. So I did that. Met Gary, and he looked at my portfolio and went, oh, yeah, you should definitely come. We've got Dave Gibbons here at the moment. And I was like, oh, because I knew him because he was drawing Rogue Trooper and stuff like that and Dread. And it was actually really it was funny. I apologized to Dave later on because he said that, I've said this before, but he met me there and he was giving me advice, which I completely ignored. And he said, when I met him at a comic convention, like probably a couple of years later, once I'd been working for 2000 AD, he went, oh, yeah, I remember you. I said, yeah. And he went, yeah, I remember you because of your admirable lack of respect. And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, I was such a dick. I was so arrogant. I can't believe it. But in a way, I'm kind of glad. I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. That wasn't it. It was more like I liked the idea, like looking back, that I've kind of maintained an integrity of not being too influenced by other people and what they were doing and what they were drawing. I've always been a bit of an odd one out, and it's worked to my advantage in ways, and it's worked to my disadvantage financially. But I wouldn't have changed it. I'm very happy with the way things have gone, because it wasn't ever about a career for me. It was about using the art as a tool to investigate a spiritual medium. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And if it didn't allow me to do that, then I would drop it immediately. I remember having conversations with Alan Grant, trying to convey this, what I'm talking about now, and not knowing exactly what I wanted, and him saying, quite honestly, Simon, I've got no fucking idea what you're on about. And I'd be like, oh, God damn, I've got to nail this down. And I got to the point where, towards the end of Revere, when this other art, this compulsive the Dogon artwork started just jumping into my head, and that was a supernatural project. Sorry, it just was so odd the way that happened. I learned to airbrush in about a week, right?
Yeah.
I was bought this airbrush as a birthday present, a very expensive, birthday present by my girlfriend, and I looked at it and went, "Oh, that's nice." And in my mind, I was like, "I have no idea what that is or how to use it or anything," and I just left it there. And she said to me, probably like 2 or 3 months later, "Are you never going to use it?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And this was like as this whole process was starting, and I just had a little kind of mess around on it, and went, "Oh, okay, I'll get it." And then within about a week, I'd painted a picture that was 8 feet high, right, of this Gorgon demon thing, this woman with a snake body, and my girlfriend looked at it and she went, "How did you do that?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then I would wake up at 3 a.m, like with this image just absolutely clear in my mind, and I would get up and I would work 36 hours nonstop. She would be like, "You're actually scaring me right now," and not just because of the intensity of my work process, but because of the subject matter, which it was all very, very dark, just like Johnny's stuff, but obviously with my own take on it and all that. But it was peculiar, and it was accompanied by a lot of hypnagogic states and visions and a lot of really peculiar stuff. And I very quickly realized that I'd reached a point where my art technique was so fluid that I didn't have to think about it anymore at all. If I look at something like Revere or Strontium Dog, I can see so many faults in it. And it's fine, it was a learning process. When I look at the work that I did for Dogon, I'm like, no one on this earth can tell me that that's badly done. All they can say is they don't like it, and that's fine. But if someone tells me that something about Revere or Strontium Dog, and they say, "Oh well, I think you've done this. I think you've done this. I think you've done that. You could have done that." I go, "Yeah, probably right." But with Dogon, it was like, no, that's absolutely rock solid, and because of that fluidity, there was I got the opportunity to access a part of my mind and my creative process that was previously, let's say, obscured by worries about how I was going to articulate what was in my head and get it onto the paper, right? So once that was out of the way, this stuff just came pouring out, and where it's from, I don't know, but I some of it is human information. I think there were symbols that I was drawing that were I was drawing Japanese words, Berber Arabic. I was from Brixton in South London. How would I never ever seen Berber Arabic written down? I might have heard someone speak it, who knows, right? But I've never seen it written down. But why would I be drawing Berber Arabic symbols? The only answer that I could come up with was either I'd seen it somewhere in my life and was repeating it, or it came out of the collective consciousness, right? Which is what I was trying to access. And it wasn't just that. There are other symbols that I was using that came from areas that I had no knowledge of, and words in languages that I didn't know, Sanskrit, Urdu. So, and it was correct as well.
I'm interested in the notion of art as an expression of subconscious, of things we don't necessarily know about ourselves. Because I'm going to bring this back to talking about Bradley, because of course you walk into IPC and you slam this portfolio down on the desk. At a very particular, and it's a really critical moment actually, and we'll come on to talk about the kind of coincidence and timing and stuff like that, because the first the Future Shock that's got Bradley in it is what, 1987.
Is it really?
Yeah. And Deadline magazine, Brett Ewins and Steve Dillon and Jamie Hewlett and all these guys. That's 1988. And around about this time, Simon Bisley is appearing. This seems to be the changing of the guard. Obviously, there's a practical reason for that, because the British invasion has pissed off to America. So they're naturally looking for but the range of artistic talent and looking at your early work and how anarchic and unusual and unique it is, there seems to be this kind of, I don't know, alignment that means when you put that portfolio down on that desk and Steve McManus goes, yeah, of course we'll give you work, this is amazing.
It was it's kind of like there was definitely a feeling at that time, and in the next three or 4 years, where there was definitely something really hyper creative going on in 2000 AD. I think the editorial staff were very open-minded and were just game for pretty much anything, which helped. But the artists that were coming in, they had a youth and an exuberance to them that kind of wasn't there before. Even though people like Dave Gibbons, they're rock solid, and Kev O'Neill and people like that, they were like, I'm not criticizing them at all, but we had I think we brought like the rock and roll into it, if you see what I mean. And it was funny, just being at the comic conventions and stuff, and being on the stage and talking to all those people, and it's just a laugh. It was really, really, really good fun. And I met some really good people there. I mean, obviously I met Johnny there, and that was a funny conversation how that started. But I think that
you've got to tell us about this funny conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, I was in the bar and I was just, I can't remember who I was talking to. I was just having conversation or something, and there was this guy just staring at me, so I was just sort of stared back, because I was like, from South London, you're fearless. What's this guy want? And he came over, and I was like, well, he doesn't look aggressive, so I don't know what he's going to say. And he just came straight up to me. He looked me in the face. He said, "Do you believe in God?" And I went, "No." "Why'd you ask me that?" And he went, "Because you're glowing." And I went, "What?" He said, "You're glowing, and no one else in the room is glowing." And I kind of find that funny because of what I was doing, what I was into at the time, and the martial arts and all the rest of it. So we just hit it off straight away, and just spent the rest of the time just hanging out and talking, and we just became friends. So that was basically literally the first conversation I ever had with John Hicklenton.
Wonderful. I mean, what was your, going into the 2000 office, what was your impression of that? What your memories of that world as it was at that moment? What was your as a a young Turk, as a kid going into this kind of environment?
I think I found it quite. It wasn't formal. It was very what's the word? like it was involved in an efficient process. There were stacks of artwork. There were people busily shuffling around doing stuff. But all the editors had time to come out and hang around with me for like 20 minutes. So I was like, they can't be that busy. But I found their demeanor was informal, friendly, helpful. I felt like even if they'd have said to me, no, well, we're not interested, they still would have given me good advice, of what to do, either to improve what I was doing or where to go next or something like that. They're just generally quite helpful, which I saw like later on when, at conventions and stuff, when fans came up to them or, when they were doing panels and stuff like that. And they would, so I guess that they were very good at that, very professional at it. So yeah, I think it was a huge place though. Big corporation, and I remember looking at it. I to be honest, my way of thinking, and it's always been that way, is I don't really pay much attention to that sort of thing. I just go in there. I have a goal. I wanted to do X. Can I do X? Yes. Right, great. I don't really think, holy shit, I can't believe that. It was just like I was supposed to do it. I didn't really think twice. And I think they probably just went, this guy's confident, isn't he? And it wasn't that I was big-headed or anything like that. I just didn't really think about it. And just as I didn't think about it when I finished Revere, this other artwork started, the Dogon artwork, and I just lost interest in doing the comics. I just didn't think about it. It was just like, that's what I've got to do next. And I just got on with it. I never really planned my life, and I still don't.
Because Dark and Gold Knight have just brought out a small collection of your Shuck and Dude.
Oh God, yeah,
script
yeah.
From what was it? A computer and video games magazine.
Yeah.
Which is very early, but and anybody who looks at that knows exactly that this is the kind of Bradley and
yeah
period. What was it like seeing that again after some time?
Really weird. I mean, when they called me up about it, and they said, "Have you got the artwork?" I went, "No." Like, do you know where I said, I've got no idea. I can't even remember it. I've got this vague memory of what their characters look like.
Yeah.
But I said I've not thought about it in years. I've got no interest in it, not because I hate it or anything. It's just gone. It's so far gone. I'm like, I just haven't thought about it. And they said, well, we'd really like to collect it. I said, well, go on then. I don't care. Do it. So they did it. And but seeing it again, I just laughed. I was like, I can't believe that. I remember just sitting there, pretty much making it up as I went along.
Yeah.
With my mate. We just sitting there late at night. It's like, right, well, I want this to happen and that and this. And I said, right, write some dialogue for that and I'll do that bit. And yeah, we just kind of did that. And I remember it getting slated in many ways. And then there were people who really loved it. And I was like, well, and that's been my kind of career all along, I think. Because even then, I didn't really do it for anyone else. I just did it because it was fun and I just wanted to do it. I didn't really think beyond my own liking of it. With Strontium Dog, someone else was writing it, so it was more structured. With Revere, it was like just wild. I mean, put me and John Smith together and leave us to get on with something. That was a recipe for weirdness that, I don't know how they didn't see that coming. I don't know why anyone was surprised when they got what they got and just went, what the fuck is this? I was like, and so, and with Dogon, that was absolutely compulsive. That just poured out one image at a time in very systematically. And I didn't have a single thought for if anyone was going to like it or not. I didn't care. So yeah,
because something like Bradley, obviously 2000 AD had DR and Quinch, which is the most obvious.
See, I nearly did DR and Quinch.
Did you?
Yeah. They asked me to do like sample artwork for it. I did sample artwork for ABC Warriors.
Yep.
DR and Quinch. I think that was it. I think it was those two, and then Strontium Dog. Yeah,
right.
Obviously, and I think they were considering me for DR and Quinch. I think that I think what Richard Burton said, and he was right. He said, "You made them look too young." And I was like, yeah, I think so. But then Strontium Dog, the opening for Strontium Dog came up, and they were like, "We want you to do this." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then, half the fans were like pulling their hair out, screaming and hating me, and the other half were like, "Whoa!" So, yeah.
I mean, what was your, in practical terms, what was your process like? Because it's so fascinating to see a style from someone who is, by your own admission, self-taught. You know, you've not really any kind of formal art education.
No, I mean, at secondary school, my art teachers were very diligent, and I loved them. They were great. After that, I was just kind of doing my own thing, really.
Because the way that you form the human body, the way that your characters move, the way they sit in within the environment, the way that you're laying down lines on the page, that it's everything is. I mean, I described it to somebody as the bastard son of El Greco and Francis Bacon.
That's really good.
and you know, I think you'd mentioned kind of Brian Froud and Alan Lee as influences as well. But it just think it was a style that was and remains unique. How?
I don't know. Honestly, I never really thought about it.
Right.
It was when I look back on it. I mean, I'm working on something now, like a black and white strip, and that's because it's like a strip of a TV show idea. It's very realistic in the anatomy and it's very structured, more mature, basically. And I don't feel like it's a compromise for me, because I feel like I've changed, you know, with regards to how I approach drawing people and my approach to the people who are going to look at it. Because it's like, okay, am I just going to do what I did in the past and just do whatever I want and not, without any consideration? Or am I going to bear in mind that other people want to look at it and be able to follow it? Do I want that? Yes, I do. So, okay, now I've got to have a little more discipline about how I lay out the pages, how people follow it from frame to frame, etc., etc. And so that's way more considered. If you were to ask me how that style developed, then I can tell you like exactly how it happened. But with the other stuff, with the Revere, and it was literally just bang. I used to come in with one page would be like I don't know if you can see that big, and then one would be that big, and they'd be like, all right, so we're gonna have to get a transparency of that one, and this one can be put on the drum and scanned. And they were like, you've got to standardize the sizes of these. And I was like, oh, okay. So I eventually did. And they still sort of thought it was like slightly too large, because I hated working small. I still do. But yeah, some of the stuff I must have been such a pain in the ass, really, because I would come in with like, you know, great big bits of card and they'd be like, what are we going to do with that? And they couldn't put it around the drum, so they'd have to take a photograph of it, the transparency and all the rest of it, and it's a lot of hassle. But for me, it was art. I approached each picture as if it was a piece of art, not a comic page. I think, all right, if I was going to come up with any way of describing why the style is the way it is, it's because of that. And what you said about El Greco and Francis Bacon, it was my art piece. Each one is an art piece, and so it was, how it came together as a bit of story. That was a secondary consideration.
But it's like I said, you know, so much of art, particularly from young artists, can just be such a wonderful expression of what's going on. You know, the world is filtering into this brain, and the brain is then just kind of, you know, and you look at the early Bradley stuff, and you know, you've got the Sisters of Mercy in there, you've got a bit of politics, you know, and it I think one of the things that because I came to Bradley relatively late in its run originally, and one of the things that I spent a lot of time looking at and thinking about was just how I think uncompromising is the wrong word, because uncompromising can mean aggressive, and while there was a certain degree of
definitely had aggression
to it, I wouldn't call it aggressive, but just in that it didn't really have any limits, like, you know, whatever you wanted to draw. So Alan Mackenzie, who was the writer, is, you know, putting jokes and trying to formulate a story, and you're on the page just basically doing whatever you
pretty much like. I mean, it's funny you said not having any limits, because I used to get told off for drawing right off the page, like past the frames. And
never go off the bleed. Never go off the bleed.
Yeah. That's what they were saying to me. Bleed. I was like, what's a bleed? I didn't know what they were on about. And they were like, it makes ink go everywhere. It's like, it's really messy. And I was like, oh, okay. So, you know, it was only when they told me that I stopped doing it. But yeah, I was, in the end, I ended up measuring it. I was like, right, so if I draw it there, it's going to be offside. Go right to there. So I'd have things coming out of the frames. And I had one frame where it was upside down. and someone wrote in and said, do you understand that the frame on page 4 of Strontium Dog episode blah blah is upside down? And Alan Mackenzie went, what the fuck, is this guy some sort of wingnut? Does he not know that we knew that? And but it was, yeah, when I look back on it, I was like, oh dear, I really just, it was, at least I cleared it with Alan Grant anyway. I said, you all right with it? He went, yeah, I love it, it's great. He said, do what you want. And I was like, all right, fine. As long as he was happy, I didn't really care. But the editorial staff could, you know, take their headache tablets and be like, oh God, no. But
I mean, the thing the thing I think that you earned your place in 2000 AD history, as it was because you worked on the final solution, the Strontium Dog story in which Johnny dies. But that itself had quite a fitful publishing history, didn't it? Because, you know, there was the chunk that you drew, and then there was a big gap, and Neil came. Tell us a little bit about where you were at and how that came about.
I think that kind of coincided with partly with my realization that I wanted to do something that was more spiritually oriented. And partly to do with the fact that I had done 28 episodes straight. And the only other person who was working harder than me was Steve Yoel on Zenith. Yeah. And Richard Burton said, you and Steve are really earning your money right now. Because we were doing stuff and it was getting published like a week later. We were literally right up against the deadline the whole time. And I just got to a point where I was like, I'm kind of tired. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I had a chat with Richard Burton, and he asked me if I was okay not doing it. I said, yeah, but I feel like I've done enough of it. And I think Colin McNeil had already started, because they preempted the fact that I wasn't going to reach the next deadline, and I didn't really give a shit anymore. I was like, I've had enough of it. And not because I didn't like it. It was just, you know, there was constant full-on concentration for, like, I mean, how long did it run?
Oh God, no! You're asking a significant amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. And I was a hermit, basically, sitting drawing from the moment I got up to the moment I went to bed, day after day after day. And I think that what it showed me was I've actually got no problem drawing day after day after day, but I want to be doing something that I feel is pushing this notion that I've got forward, and I felt like Strontium Dog wasn't doing it. And that's why I was calling Alan and saying, something's missing. I don't know what it is, and it's not a criticism of his writing. There was something in me that needed something that he wasn't writing about, because he just wasn't. He had other concerns in the story. And then, I had a break from it, and then I came up with the idea for Revere. I had a conversation with John Smith at Glasgow comic convention, and he said he would write it. Pitched the idea to Richard Burton, and he was like, "Yeah, do it." And then, the rest is a whole messy history.
Well, I just wanted to touch on that, because you've described baffling Alan Grant at times. What was your relationship like with Alan Mackenzie on Bradley? Was it a case of the scripts turn up and you do it, or was it collaborative?
No, it wasn't collaborative. Right. Reason being, you know what? No, that's not necessarily true. When we did the Bradley music biz interviews, we actually did meet the people.
Okay.
Right? So we did meet the Sisters of Mercy. Patricia, the one who was in it, we met her. We sat and talked to her. All the people that were in it, it's Essex Press.
Right.
We met them all. So we were hanging out with them and chatting with them and taking photographs and all the rest of it. And then we'd go off, and Alan would write the script, and I didn't tell him what to write. I didn't collaborate with in that respect. And then he would, he'd write it, and then I'd just illustrate it. And it was really funny, actually. Just we met Tim Simonon from Bomb the Bass.
Yeah,
and he was really nervous about meeting us, because we were 2018 creators, and he was like, "Oh, I'll be really nervous about meeting you guys." And then Alan never did that one, because he said he got too nervous.
Right.
And we were supposed to do. There was some rap artist, some British rap artist as well, and Alan bottled out of that one as well. But it was it's funny. Just a lot of sorry, carry on.
No, I was going to say, because that is the kind of period when 2000 AD and music just kind of really started in like comics in general. You
know what, I think that was a lot of that happened because I was plastering the walls in my strips with the bands I was listening to.
Right.
And they were getting in touch and saying, "Oh, well," I remember, who was it? There was a really well-known, like, one of these, these bands that used to put music together, like scratching records and stuff.
Yeah,
can't remember what they were called. But they were like really chuffed that they were on the wall. And I mean, they were all like into it. Was his name Mark Lamar, the guy in
Radio 1, yeah.
I mean, it was weird. It was weird. It was a crossover. I ended up working for an enemy doing artwork for them, and they wanted Bradley in there on the like all the Mosh records, all the skater stuff.
Yeah.
So I did some stuff for them with Seething Wells. So it was a definite like crossover. I don't know, was I the only one doing that at the time? Was anyone else doing it?
I mean, there were bits and bobs. I mean, the obvious one is Zenith. Grant Morrison putting sometimes barely disguised and not at all disguised versions of pop groups in there. But I mean, by the time I came along to 2008 on a weekly basis, there were record reviews. Would be doing her record reviews or whatever. So
who was it? There was a girl who was doing that.
Yeah, Audrey or Aubrey or
Audrey. No, Audrey was there. There was someone else as well. There was a girl called Breeze who I met.
Right.
At one of the things where we went, like it was a music thing.
Mm.
I'd never met her before. I was talking to her. She was trying to calm me down. She said, oh, you're really enthusiastic. Calm down. But she was doing some reviews of music. I can't remember what bands particularly. Audrey was more of a goth. I don't know if that was the only music she reviewed. But, yeah, I remember Audrey.
What I find really interesting at this point is that on Strontium Dog you've got Ferrell Jackson, who is this particular very important character in Strontium Dog history. Somebody who seems to be a character that with the greatest respect to everyone else who's tried, only you seem to be able to draw in the way that it should be drawn. And then we come to Revere, who's this teenager running around a post-apocalyptic London, and it's not a stretch to see a common thread here. And I wonder if you're identifying with these characters, pouring yourself into them.
Yeah. I mean, I think Alan designed Ferrell basically because he wanted to see. He sort of designed it for me to draw, if you see what I mean. And with Revere, it was more. I just kind of, I don't know. People, even when I was drawing Strontium Dog, people said that I looked like I was in it, and I was like, I don't really recall trying to do that. But with Revere, it's just kind of like, well, might as well just do it. So, yeah, I think in that respect, there is a lot of identification. Also, with the martial arts background that character had, and his use of a samurai sword. I know how to use one. I've actually done stunt work with for some filming that was done because I was the only one who could use the sword. The cameraman couldn't believe it when he saw it was real. He was like, "Is that real?" I was like, he'd done work on like Sleepy Hollow and some other stuff. Really, he's very sort of well known in the industry, and he was like suddenly sort of flinching back with the camera, and I was like, "What's the problem?" He went, "Is that a real sword?" I said, "Yeah." He went, "They would never let you do that on a film strip. They do it with CGI or the wooden one or plastic or something." And I was like, oh well, this is real, so watch out. So he said, "What's a safe distance?" I was like telling him, what distance to keep. And so yeah, in that respect, there's a lot of me in that character, and in a lot of the the weird events that happened and visions and stuff like that. Was all of it was in some way bizarrely autobiographical. So yeah,
because you mentioned that you drew this piece, you drew Revere, and this was then the basis upon which John Smith based it. Tell us a little bit about that process, because John himself has said that's probably the closest, the most collaborative project that he's ever worked on.
Yeah, we were in touch quite a lot. We'd have conversations on the phone. Sometimes it'd be, "What do you want to happen?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm not sure." And other times I knew exactly what I wanted to happen, but I never told him how to write it because I think he's a brilliant writer. And it was, you don't micromanage someone like that. That's a stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
Like anyone tried to micromanage me, I'm unemployable, basically, as far as I'm concerned. I cannot see myself doing anything other than what I want. So, and John sort of struck me as a similar type. He was, so yeah, we'd be on the phone, we'd discuss it, and then he would send me like the script, and most of the time I would be like, "Yeah, this is great." Even if it was going in a direction I wasn't expecting. Some of it was just so way out. I was like, "I've just got to draw that. I don't care what it is, what it's about. I just want to draw it."
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a real pleasure working with him. I know I heard later on he was going through some serious like difficulties because of an acid trip that he was on. Because he said that the last part of it, he was coming back from a bad acid trip. He didn't mention that to me. I think I kind of lost touch with him at that point. Maybe he thought I was a bad influence. Not that I was taking drugs. I didn't need Christ. That's the last thing I need. I can't even imagine what would happen to me if I took something like that. So
what's so fascinating about Revere is that it starts off being a relatively what's the word for this? A relatively not standard, but you can kind of.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
it's a dystopian story. You got your elements there, and then it very quickly just develops into this kind of dreamlike, trance-like state. And the one thing that really struck me, even at the time, was that 2000 AD was really struggling at this point. It was the post-Bisley era. And it was struggling with the acres of mud. You'd got printing machines that just couldn't cope with the subtlety of palette of painted artwork.
Yeah.
And then Revere comes along, and it is operating in the same sphere, but under the glare of light. There's red, you look at some of the work that and again, this is not a criticism of their stuff at all. Carl Critchlow and say Greg Staples were doing, where detail kind of gets lost in shadows, whereas Revere, everything's very bright because of course it's a kind of climate change parable, and as a result, the horrors that are on show are very much on show. You're not trying to hide them; they are front and center. And I'm interested in your thinking behind your process, and also what the hell, man.
I think I think Revere was painted mostly in gouache, that thick tubes of stuff.
Yeah,
and I wanted it to. I really like the texture of it when it's thick. I wanted it to almost look like oil painting, and so that's probably why it's so bright and jumps out. Because I was squirting this stuff straight out of the tube onto the paper. I wasn't mixing it. I was mixing it on the page. I think that when I did the third book and I used the airbrush, the printing process could not handle it at all.
Yeah,
they did not look like that. And I was kind of disappointed. So I understand what you mean about them struggling with mud, because it did look like muddy. But with the earlier books of Revere, it really, I when I look at it now, I like the way it looks. It's bright, it's vibrant. It looks substantial most of the time. I did sort of kind of veer off a little bit with and do sort of a watercolory effect on some of the pages, and I'm not as much of a fan of those as I am of the other stuff that's really just very bright. Where I'm using the stuff from the tubes, it's quite thick. I don't know why. Probably because I was running out of paint. I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. Sometimes you think that someone might have done. Altered their style for some artistic reason. It's just that the materials are running out and they needed to get finished. So it might have been that. I don't know.
It's fascinating what you're saying about moving on to the airbrush, because that third book, it feels chrome. You've got a much more diffuse attitude towards light and light sources and surfaces and things like that. And I mean, what have you revisited Revere recently?
What do you mean? Looked at it?
Have you looked at it? Have you gone back to it?
Yeah. I've looked at it. Yeah.
What has been your emotional response to
that? Generally good. I mean, I look at it and I go, the criticisms that people have got of it are generally justified. I don't care. I didn't care at the time, and I don't care now. I didn't do it for them, and that's not a selfish attitude. It was like I just literally wasn't thinking like that. It was a tool that I enjoyed using in order to unlock what came next. And what came next, I stand behind 100%. So I'm like, why would I regret it? And what I have found, which is interesting and quite gratifying, is that as the readers got older, they liked Revere more. And I asked myself, well, why is that? And I said, because it's more art than it is comics. And I think that they can appreciate the art more because they're more mature. But, you know, as for the, you know, the other criticism, like, you know, I could have been more careful with my anatomy, and I could have been more structured in the page, you know, the page layout. Yeah, they're right. But I just wasn't thinking about that. And I don't regret it. I wouldn't do it differently. If I went back and did it, if I did it now, it would be different. But I wouldn't change what happened.
I think possibly your work is a bit of a lightning conductor for that period, because it was such a departure from what went before. So you get somebody like Bisley on first ABC Warriors, and then not Nemesis, Slain. And you can kind of see the progression there. You know, his stuff on ABC Warriors, it's got the gothicism of Kevin O'Neill, and then through to Slain. You know, Glenn Fabry had prepared the way to a greater or lesser extent. But with something like Strontium Dog, we're going from Carlos,
yeah,
you know, King Carlos.
That must have been like such a slap in the face for absolutely everybody. And I honestly did not think about it. I wasn't in touch with anyone about that. Only person I really spoke about it with was Alan. And all I said was, "Are you all right with it? Do you like it?" And he said, "Yeah, I really like it. Just do what you want." And I was like, that was all I needed. I was actually surprised that people were upset. And I was like, what are they upset about? And because it's different. I'm like, well, yeah, obviously it's different. It's a different person trying it. What is the issue? Never really thought about it. That people need this period of adjustment, that they felt like, I don't know, betrayed or what. I don't know what problems they had. But my opinion and my feeling about art is, it should in some way challenge you. It should make you think, even if I know someone who's got a photograph that their son found really disturbing, right? And he hated it, and he told his mum, "I hate that photograph," and it's like really famous. I think it's about Joel Peter Witkin or something like that. And she said, "When I die, I'm going to give you that photograph, and I'm going to give you it because it's creating a response in you that you have to think about." And I thought, that's actually very wise. Because you should have to think about art. If you're not thinking about it, then what's the point? What's it for? Just like some bland bit of entertainment that stops you thinking about your own boredom for a while. No, that's not good enough. And that was why it's what's been driving me to do what I've been doing, all this time. It had to be meaningful. Yeah, absolutely essential. Won't do anything without that.
It's interesting that, you know, you get to the end of Revere, and from what I understand from previous interviews that you've done, that seems to be a door closing and another door opening, in that you know, I've done comics, and now you go off and you have quite a peripatetic lifestyle, don't you? You start to move around.
It wasn't so much that, you know, I was done with comics. It was the other thing was so dominant that I just stopped thinking about it. Again, it wasn't like that part of my career is over. It wasn't like that. It was literally a seamless slide into the other artwork, and it was so compulsive. I simply didn't have time to think about anything else. And you know, the result was Dogon. Which is, I understand it's peculiar, but once again, not apologizing for it. It did exactly what I needed it to do.
Forgive me. Is this a kind of is Dogon a word that has meaning to you? Is it related to Lovecraft's Dagon, or is
No,
it just something that's
Dogon is a reference to the tribe in Africa who knew that the Sirius star system was a binary star system before anyone even looked at it with a telescope. And they asked them, why, and they said, the people there came and told us. And there are people who've since said, well, there's a lot of rubbish and this is why, and proved it or whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't really care. And it's not that I believe them wholeheartedly or not. I just like the story. And also, if you reverse Dogon, it says no God. So, and it's kind of what it's about. Dogon is, it's a systematic visual journey into an inner reality on a scale that's less than subatomic. Okay. But obviously things cannot exist as they exist at that scale because everything's made up of subatomic particles. But at this scale, beyond that scale, you're finding whole worlds, and it's just a story about the multiplicity of universes, and it's also a mythological journey because all the beings that are met along the way. You've got Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld. You've got the boatman, the ferryman across the River Styx, but the River Styx in this case, the Styx Delta, is this massive confluence of energy. And all the way through it, you've got this commentary from this genetically engineered soldier who goes from being she's accompanied in a way by this artificial intelligence probe that's actually scanning her memories. She's dead, and it's reviewing her memories, and it goes from being purely analytical and just interested in the scientific information to becoming more and more poetic and basically falling in love with this soldier who's now dead. This character called Avia, because of her just dogged determination to push her way through this hellish place where the temperatures can range from like just above absolute zero to 30,000 degrees or whatever, where the medium she's moving through is under so much pressure because of the temperatures that it's like moving through concrete, and yet she continues to move. And it's all about getting to a point where she can observe what's at the center. And this is pretty much what you do in meditation. You push on regardless of what you see until you can observe what's at the center, what causes you to be you. And what happens in the story in Dogon is that the center disintegrates as soon as she sees it, because all you've got to do is you've got to be there to observe it. It's not about solving anything when you get there. It's just getting there. And it is a very hard journey. So kind of that's what it's about. It's as well as the mythology, which I drew on, which is just classical Greek mythology, but the spin on it is completely personal. And these things, again, they were seen. A lot of it was spontaneous. The characters that were coming out only got named afterwards. I didn't say I need a boatman. I need a ferryman now. I need a Cerberus. It was just that's what came out, and then it just happened to conform. And that's what was interesting about it, is that there is definitely what I call atavistic racial memory that we all have of deep-seated iconography. That if you get access to it, if you're not prepared for it, it's very disturbing. That's the comment that I get a lot of the time from that artwork. Is people find it very, very disturbing. And personally, I don't. I've never had a problem with it. I used to come out of meditations. Sometimes they were so intense, I'd be numb all down one side of my body. But I'd have all these images in my head, and I would just go and I would paint them. Or I'd do the washing up first to calm down, and then I'd paint them. And even to the point where a lot of this was happening when I was doing my martial arts training, and my kung fu teacher, I used to drive me home because he lived on the way, and he was a very important person in my life, very sort of solid, steady guy, a Jamaican guy, and he used to discuss it with me and say, if it's getting too much, you need to stop. And I'm like, I'm fine. But he spoke to the chief instructor, and he gave me all these Tibetan scrolls to put under my bed because they were like convinced I was going to get possessed by demons. So it was that bad. I'd say it was me and another guy. He wasn't an artist, but he was getting stuff happening to him as well because of the training we were doing. And it was, and we were discussing it with the teachers, and they were like, "Oh wow, you need to watch out." So it was in many ways very real, the effects these things are having. But that's always been my attitude anyway. It's like, what is real? Real is what affects you in a real way, right? So if you say you go home, or you're at home, say you go to bed, right, and you have a nightmare that scares you the life out of you, it makes you wake up and you don't want to go back to sleep. Is it real? Of course it's real. The effect is real, right? And for someone who's insane, for them, what they're seeing, no one else can see it, but for them, the effect is very real. So what is reality in the end? And this was, part of the whole investigation, and which is still ongoing. It's just become more refined now, and I've got a very clear idea what to do, how to do it, and I don't really need anyone else to teach me how to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. So this is something that I find fascinating because, you've been on a journey of self-discovery, based on meditation and your background in martial arts, and in other interviews you've talked about your ability to focus and to concentrate, and that being the kind of key to opening up, your different way of thinking. And I'd look at the life of an artist, which is focusing on something for a very long period of time to the exclusion of all other things, to allow whatever talent or ability to flow out of you. And I see a direct correlation between those two things.
Yeah,
you've had a lifetime of blocking things out, and so by your very nature, meditation and focus, and you've talked about an ascetic lifestyle. It feels like, from the very beginning for you, it was all about having an ability to focus and zero in on what you want.
You've got to be quite single-minded about it. I mean, if I look at my life now, a lot of people say that I live like a monk. And for me, I mean, that's probably mostly true. For me, it's not a question of deprivation. I don't need the things that other people think I'm missing. You see what I'm saying? I don't miss alcohol. Never been that interested in drugs. I don't need to be going out and entertaining myself. I'm quite happy sitting still for 3 hours or 4 hours at a time, because the things you find out, I cannot begin to explain to you the power that you've got in your mind. Everyone has this. Everyone. The amount of energy that is bound up in your thought processes right now, and when you finish this interview, are astonishing. And that is not an exaggeration. Everyone has this thing within them, and it is a force of nature. That is what I've come face to face with doing this. A force of nature. There's been times when I've seen stuff in my mind and I turned and I ran in my mind because I could not face it. It was just so powerful. I was like, I don't know what to do with that. And I wish I hadn't, And there's been other times when I've stood my ground and gotten rewards from it. But the amount of just sheer energy that's caught up in just mundane thinking, it's kind of clarified for me why monks do what they do, and why nuns do what they do. I'm talking now about like the Buddhists. I don't know much about the Christians or anything like that, but why they isolate themselves, because it makes their ability to deal with what they're seeing way more efficient. It's just getting rid of the clutter. And up until a certain point, it never appealed to me. It kind of got on my nerves a bit, listening to, people talk about it or reading about it, and thinking, it's just, there's all these moral reasons that got on my nerves. Now I understand that it's not really about the morality at all, really. That is part of it, but it's more about not doing things that waste energy. And oddly, one of the things that doesn't waste energy is being kind, being gentle, being a good human being. It's intrinsic to this process. And people have said that I've changed a lot, and I can contest to that. That is actually true. I used to be like a real hooligan, and I'm not anymore. And I've got friends that are doing a similar thing to me, and they're the same. I knew them when they were very different. It does change you. It does make you more efficient. There are a lot of behavioral patterns and emotions that people spend their time wasting energy on that are very, very detrimental. And the ultimate goal of all this is to get to the point where you're wasting the minimal amount of energy, because those processes have stopped. That's kind of what it's about in the end. And funnily, when you mentioned concentration, that was one of the biggest stumbling blocks. Concentration is an act of will. It's an act of focus that's deliberate. What I found is that this process, in order to open it up, you've got to let that go, drop it, because this whole process runs contrary to everything you've been taught and conditioned to believe, right? People have been conditioned to believe that you use your willpower, that you focus, that you try, to earn a living, to build a family, to do this, to do that, all of that stuff. So to use that tool to try to break into this internal realm is completely counterproductive. It's the wrong way around. So you've actually got to learn to drop things, let things go. And that's what I was talking about earlier on about an act of negation. It's actually about not doing things rather than doing more. So yeah, I don't know if that explains anything.
It's fascinating because you look at something like Revere, which people can see. So I've already identified a potential couple of influences, but people see Geiger in there. They see all sorts of things. I see in your Bradley, I see the kind of the son of Ken Reed and Leo Baxendale and people like that. And I find it so interesting that it feels like your journey, particularly with 2000 AD, was you learning what you were about.
Yeah.
And you got to the end of that process. Well, not the end of the process, but you got to a certain point in that process and went, I don't need this anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't done as rudely as that, but that's pretty much what happened. It wasn't I dismissed it because I thought, what a load of crap. It wasn't that. I just evolved to a point where it was I was just driven in a new direction. And I think, and it coincided with a change in management, and the management didn't like me, and they didn't like Johnny either. I'm not naming any names, but I think that killed a lot of that vibe that it had. Yeah, I'm not being big-headed, not saying it happened because that I wasn't working for them anymore. It wasn't that. It was just that it became more sterile after that in some way.
Difficult though, because I think, you know, that change coincided with the end of that process we discussed. You know, deadline had gone, crisis had gone, all the others have fallen by the wayside, and so now it feels like such a specific, compact era that you
it was.
You can kind of trace from Bradley to the end of Revere. You know?
Yeah, which is kind of weird, really.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, obviously I've contributed to that. And I do often wonder how much, you know, that it sort of petered out when I left. Did it, was I like a catalyst for the start and the finish? Or, I don't know, it's weird. It's like there was a lot of strange coincidences that all came into play. And I'm not being a bighead. I'm not claiming responsibility for the whole thing, but there was definitely something going on.
Yeah.
And it is odd the way it kind of ramped up, and then it disappeared as I left. You know, and I don't know if it's just because it was maybe it served its purpose in that the creative freedom that I had was about to be stamped on anyway. So I just kind of bailed out at the right moment, or what? I don't know. It's just that's the way it happened. And it is, I think you kind of got it right. There is a certain quality to the time that it was kind of a special moment that you could literally like go like that. So it was that bit. Yeah. And it was for sure. It definitely was that bit. And I've not really had much contact with comics since. I've always had and still have a lot of respect for 2000 AD. I wouldn't have any problem working for them again. I think it's they've contributed so much in a weird way, indirectly, to world creativity, like in terms of like directors and art directors and, you know, people who are creating creatures for movies and stuff like that. I've met several people who are, you know, directors and DOPs and stuff like that, who all say, "Oh yeah, I remember reading your stuff. It's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing." And I find that really gratifying that, you know, these people have got artistic, creative careers that they're really successful in because they were sitting reading, you know, Strontium Dog and other stories that I wrote, and they know it. They say, "Yeah, I used to got copies of it. I got, you know, and you know, they're reading it again, going through it again." People write to me all the time, and it's just nice. It's just nice to know that there's been that contribution to people's well-being, that they've found. They're not doing some hateful job, that, you know, soul-destroying job. They're doing something they really like, partly because of an influence from this complete stranger who was, you know, just drawing pictures. That's an interesting dynamic if you think about it. You know, the influence we have on our surroundings. It's important. That's why it's important to me to, you know, to build a strong foundation that's got integrity, because I've got a stepdaughter and I've got a godson, and I need to be a proper influence in their life, and they said that I am. You know, they can rely on me 100%, and I know there are people who would be dead if not for me, because of the way I am and what I've done, and the places we've been. You know, in my, if you want to call it, other career, in strange, far-flung places. So, yeah, you know, so all comes down to having a cool head at the right moment.
Because you've talked in other interviews about, and we've already mentioned about, you know, coincidences and being in the right place at the right time and things like that. Because, you know, you've spent time in India. had various different roles and jobs. How the kind of, as you left the kind of gravitational pull of 2000 AD and embarked on your journey beyond there, was there ever was there ever a point of fear? Was there ever a point of, I don't know where this is taking me, or
No.
I feel concerned where this is taking me?
No, even to the point when I'll sometimes get down to my last £5, and I'll be like, I got no money for food. What do I do? And because of the way I approach things, the answer is don't do anything. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And something always comes up. And the acid test has been like highly stressful situations that are genuinely terrifying. And my reaction in those circumstances was fine. I wasn't really that concerned. I just did what needed to be done. When we were in Ukraine, we were in a missile attack. My job was to watch over my friend, make sure she was all right, because otherwise children would have killed me. And as soon as I heard that attack coming in, I was like, I knew what to do before the security guy even said anything. And so it was, and other things that have occurred. But what I've also noticed is a lack of enmity towards people who are trying to cause me harm.
Right.
Which is kind of peculiar. That's something I've noticed. Where you would normally feel like fired up with anger and self-righteousness or whatever, someone tries to blow you up with a rocket, it's kind of rude. They don't know me. Why are they trying to kill me? But at the same time, I was like, whatever, you just do what you need to do to get out of the way. And there's been other incidents where my reaction has been really odd, and I'm like, that is not normal. It's not a normal reaction to a situation that's that stressful. I should be a lot more fired up or angry or considering more violence or whatever, and I just haven't needed to. And so that's why I know that the whole process that I'm going through is working, because I just don't get wound up. And so when you ask, is there fear? No, I was attacked by a herd of bulls, and I'm not kidding. Right, a herd of bulls. I was walking through a field, and they charged me from behind.
Right.
This was like early in the morning, and I heard this rumbling noise. I was like, "What is that?" And I turned around, and there was a herd of bulls literally charging at me. And they were young, but they were like 200 kilos each. Yeah, they would have stomped the shit out of me. It didn't even dawn on me to run. I just pointed my finger at the lead bull, just stuck my finger out like that, and he just stopped dead and just looked at me. And they all just ganged up behind him, and they were like, "What are you doing? What are you stopping for?" And he was like, you could see it in his mind. He's like, "I don't know. He's sucking me out. I don't know what to do." It's really peculiar. And I was examining my reaction while this was happening, and I was like, "Why am I not scared? What is going on? This is just weird." And then I just decided, well, how long can I hold him here? Just for an experiment, It wasn't hurting him. And I held him there for a couple of minutes, and then I gave him a handful of grass, which he wouldn't eat because he didn't trust me. And I just threw it on the ground in front of him and said, "Right, bye." And I turned around and I walked, and I had 150 meters to get out of this field. I didn't look around once, and they just stood there. And they just, and I got out of that field, and I was like, if I was going to be stressed, it should have been then.
Yeah, yeah.
So why wasn't I? And that's when I started, well, I wasn't stressed because I'm doing this and I'm doing that and the other. And yeah, it's, it works. Just works.
You're going to have to tell me why you were in Ukraine getting shot at with missiles.
Because we had a contact. It's part of the Becca Harrison project. We go to a place, take pictures, come back. Carolyn takes the pictures, and then I'll work on the prints. I'll paint on them, right. And then we sell them as fine art. In that case, we had contact to a German news team who were going to Mariupol, and then we went to Shirokny, which is a town on the outskirts of, well, it's quite a way away from Mariupol, but it's right on the front. And we just wanted to see what it was like. You know, you hear about it in the news. We said, is it going to be dangerous? And she said, yeah. So you're going to need body armor and, you know, and helmets and stuff like that. So we got all that. I sort of talked it over with Carolyn. I was like, are you sure you want to go? Because you might see stuff you can't get out of your head afterwards. You know, if you're seeing dead people and things like that. And she was like, yeah, I want to go. I was like, all right. I said, and you understand you can't ensure your safety in a war zone. Yeah, if it goes wrong really fast and very badly. And she was like, yeah, I'm willing to do it. And we talked it over with the you know, journalist, and she was like, you know, she knew what she was doing. She's been in Afghanistan, Iraq, you know, she's been around. And so, yeah, we flew into Kiev. I mean, see how dodgy it was. We stayed at the Radisson. Radisson. That's the name of the. We stayed there, and you remember that incident where a Russian politician was shot outside a hotel? It was a while back now. Yeah, and his bodyguard was shot but didn't die, and then sadly died later in hospital from his wounds. Yeah. That happened right outside our hotel. So from Kiev, we had to get our documentation. So we ended up going to this shifty looking building. It looked like a closed youth club, right? The windows boarded up. Yeah. And some dude handed us papers and looked at our passport. And then we took off to the front. At one point we were bombing along this road, and everyone's being thrown around in the van, and we're like, what's going on? And the driver wouldn't speak to us, and we're like, what's going on? And then we drove into the military base, and then he told us, oh, there were snipers shooting at the car. Like, right. Better not to know about it at the time. We were there literally 5 minutes, and a rocket attack came in. I just grabbed Carolyn. I heard this noise and I was like, I don't like the sound of that. I don't like the sound of that at all. And I looked at the security guy. I already had Carolyn by the body armor, ready to run. And I saw him sort of looking up like that into his own head, like he's thinking, I don't like the sound of that. And I just took off, you know, literally picked Carolyn up and took off towards the most concrete room I could find. And just as he shouted, take cover. And it's bloody, I'll tell you what, you do not want to be anywhere near something like that. It is horrendous. And the thing that amazed me was we could hear like barrages going in and shelling barrages going into like the nearby towns that lasted for over an hour. And I thought, an hour of that over and over and over, just the noise would it's so punishing. And the radius, the blast radius can be like, I think it's up to 200 meters. So, I mean, you're screwed if you're out in the open. And yeah, it was quite eye-opening. And seeing this town that in Shirokny, it's just completely leveled. You know, schools, just school stuff. You know, kids' toys everywhere. And then I had this quote in my head from Vladimir Putin. And it was like something like, "It's irresponsible to ever involve children in war." And I was like, "You liar." So, yeah, and people are just hypocrites, and no one benefits from that. No one. I don't care. There's no winner in a war. No way. Because you lose your humanity in order to win. And people, I think, don't really understand the consequences of that until they are a lot older. And you'll notice that a lot of people become more and more religious as they get older because they're starting to worry about, yeah, I haven't really thought about this, and maybe I should have. And my attitude has always been, I want to find out now. And my if you like, my spiritual outlook is not to believe things; it's to hear something, and if I'm curious about it, verify it. And if you can verify it, then fine. If you can't verify it, then you just have to keep an open mind, because there's a lot more going on just from what the things that I've found out from what I've been doing. There's a lot more going on than people are even remotely aware of. And it's foolish to dismiss it just because you're interested in going down a pub, having a good time, and you don't want to think about it. But that's, it's everyone's prerogative. It's up to them. I'm not one of those dogmatic people who says you should do this, you should. It's none of my business. I just know what I've got to do. If people ask me about it, I'll tell them. Give them. I'd certainly tell my godson and my stepdaughter. And funny, I've got a friend who's I'm in contact with. She's like a pen pal, and she became a huge fan of Dogon, and she's like 74. a little old like Australian lady, and we have like really, really interesting conversations about these kind of subjects, and it's just that you never know who's really looking into these things. But yeah, she's lovely, and I just feel like it's essential. It's certainly essential for me. I think the world would be a better place generally if people were a little more introspective. Let's face it, that's not an overstatement.
It's kind of something that I guess is a lesson from your work. Not just the 2000 AD stuff. That obviously we've been focusing on that. That exposing layers, because you look at the stuff even with the Strontium Dog stuff, Bradley with Revere, it's people laid bare, all the different but literally laid bare. You can see sinew and bone and all this like that. And it feels as if you're searching for a truth.
Yeah Well, I think what I've found is that there were certain events that occurred in my life when I was younger, and I didn't know what they were. When I've looked into certain like spiritual teachings at a much later age, I found the exact description of what happened to me as part of an ongoing process that every consciousness has to go through. Because of the way they're structured, nothing to do with what your personality is or anything like that. At a fundamental level, everyone's conditioning is structured in a similar way. It might be in a slightly different pattern, and that's what creates your personality, obviously. But ultimately, it has to function in a certain way. And when you strip back this obsession with specificity that everyone has about their subjective experience, and you start focusing more on a more general picture, a more universal picture, something jumps out, and this process begins. That's it's baffling and absolutely fascinating at the same time. And my respect for the people who figured this out is without limit. It is pure genius. All modern psychology is based on it, and this is stuff that was come up with 2,500 years ago or earlier. And all the techniques you see now, positive thinking, NLP, all that, it doesn't matter. You name it, right? You can trace it right back to this stuff. And the weird thing is that because I've verified certain parts of it, it then makes me say, well, okay, the person who's done this has been very thorough. It's very logically laid out. Obviously, up to this point, as far as I'm concerned, it's true. what does that mean about this last little bit that's like really weird? You know, the stuff that's talking about reincarnation and all that. And like, why would someone who's been that thorough and logical just go off at this weird tangent right at the end and go, oh, by the way, there's this bit, right? If they hadn't some direct experience of it. And the more I looked into that part of it, the more I found studies that have been done by scientists that I don't know how you'd explain them in any other way, apart from the person that they've studied has some experience of a life that happened before they were born. It's like, well, how does that happen? And so it's very peculiar. And my attitude towards it is, firstly and fundamentally, you have to understand the processes of why you are the way you are, why it all functions the way it is. Worry about that, all the rest of it afterwards, because that's just the byproduct of finding out how it works. And so in terms of like searching for a truth, yeah, definitely. I'm looking for the mechanisms, let's put it that way, of why things work the way they work and how they work. Because when you understand the mechanisms, you're free of the burden of those mechanisms. And it isn't about eradicating your conditioning. You can't do that. It's about not resisting it anymore. You can't resist circumstances. They just occur. It's impossible. And you can't resist the thoughts that come up in your mind because they just pop in there. You wouldn't know they were there unless they were there first, because you've got to recognize they're there, right? But you can then choose to not participate. There's a really interesting study that was done it was a scientific experiment, and it was very simple. Everyone had this button, and they had to press the button, and they were to press the button when they thought they were going to press the button, right? Now they're all wearing like an EEG, kind of one of those nets on their head, and they were having their brainwaves scanned and et cetera, et cetera. And what they found was there was a half a second delay between when they thought they were going to press the button and when they pressed it, as far as their brain was concerned. So their brain lit up a half second before, and then they decided that they thought they were going to press the button, which proved that their brain was doing it and before they knew it. Now, that is just really peculiar, isn't it? Your body knows what it's going to do, and your brain knows what it's going to do before you realize it. So what that implies, and that's what I found out, is that consciousness and the way we understand it is completely the opposite way around. Your mind and your body do everything first, and then yourself, your personality, takes credit for what it hasn't done, which is absurd. How can it change what's already happened? And yet it tries again and again to change what's already happened. And that's what causes all the problem, because you're resisting circumstances that have already occurred that you're not even responsible for.
On a purely practical level, to move from the sublime to the ridiculous,
Yeah.
what's the plan with Dogon? Is this a project that you think will have end, or?
No, I think it's. I'm not going to do any more to it yet. I would like to find a publisher for it. My problem has always been and still is that I'm so unmotivated when it comes to earning a living. It's not something I care enough about.
Yeah.
So it's always as if things are left to chance. And if someone came along and said, "Oh, we published that," I'd be like, "Yeah, okay," you know. But I don't really generally actively go out and look for publishers. So, I mean, I would like to see it published though, because I just really like it. And I have been contacted by a lot of people from Instagram who have said, when is it coming out as a book? You know, they want it as an object, you know, rather than stuff they looked on the screen. Plus, you would see detail in it that you'd never get on the screen because it is very plush. So yeah, I would like to get it published, but you know, if anyone watching this is a publisher and they're interested, then they should get in touch with me or get in touch with you, and then you get in touch with me. I don't really mind, but yeah, that's always been my problem. I mean, what I'm currently working on is a black and white digital project, and which started off as a comic strip. Then it became storyboards for a film shoot, And then it became like a comic strip storyboard kind of scenario for a TV series idea. And I finished the first part of it. And it's like, what is it? 180 pages long so far. And I've just done another 70 pages. It's a lot of it. And, but it's black and white, which I really like. Very dark, quite violent, but much more structured and realistic than my previous comic work. And that it's been seen by directors and production companies at the moment. I think at the moment it's with because my brother's knows the Ridley Scott's son.
Okay.
And his brother, he knows. I think he just knows the family, and then so they're having a look at it. My feeling is it will happen. It's something that I've written written and illustrated it, and then my brother's adapted it to a script form for a TV show. And again, but it's it's one of those situations where I'm like, oh, I've got all this work. What do I do with it? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to carry on working because I like doing it, and I don't push it. It's in a way it's a curse, but in a way it's not, because it seems to be that I don't suffer from a lot of fear for underachieving or overachieving one way or the other. It never really made that much difference to me. When I look back on the 2000 AD, there were artists and writers who were so driven, about creating a career for themselves and stuff, and that it was alien to me then, and it still is now. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just not me. I just don't work that way.
I mean, you just said you're not motivated by fear, and earlier on you said when you were younger and you went into the 2000 AD offices and you went to the course that Gary Leach thing, and you said, "Oh, I was so arrogant," But it just seems like fear isn't necessarily something that's ever motivated you.
No, I just don't think enough about it, or I feel calm enough to not worry about it too much. It's just I don't know. It's like I said, the acid test is when you're being bombed. If you're not scared, then you're probably not going to be scared. When you're meeting someone who's some executive somewhere. What's he going to do? Try and knife me? I'll just do him over. It's not a problem. I mean, it's funny. I'll go out for like walks and like 4 a.m, 3 a.m, in the strangest places, in parks and stuff like that, because it's just like quiet and there's no one there. And my mum will ask me, or I'll sleep in the forest, at night, and my mum goes, what if someone tries to do? I said, the most dangerous thing in the forest right now is me. And that's actually true, in England anyway. I wouldn't be so sure of it if I was in like, France or Germany or Russia or somewhere where you got bears and wolves and stuff. But yeah, it's not really something that concerns me. Every now and again, I'll get into a super spooky situation where the hairs on your back and your neck stand up and you're in this pitch dark, and I get, I have a funny idea that I see that something like that girl in The Exorcist crawling along with on her hands and legs, and it said, "What if you saw that now? What would you do?" I'd be like, honestly, I don't know. I might ask you, you all right?
The thing is,
I might run.
I mean, wasn't that long ago you were drawing stuff that is exactly?
Yeah, exactly.
You've seen all this stuff.
I've seen some horrific stuff, and the same with Johnny. We used to sit and say, "Oh, I saw this. What about this?" And he'd be like, "Oh, well, yeah, check this out." And I'd be like, and he'd say, "How do you feel about it?" I say, "It's just an interesting thing to draw." I'd come out of these things and I'd be like, "That was genuinely hideous. How do I paint it?" Some of the stuff I couldn't even begin to paint. It's been so kinetic, and I think that might be something that comes through in some of the artwork in Revere and stuff. There's that feeling of like it's going like that in your face. Some of these things that I've seen have been like that, but way more graphic and realistic. And it's like, how do you convey that? You couldn't. The sheer terror of it, or the weird fascination with the ugliness of it. You couldn't convey it. Yeah, it's odd. It's not always like that, though. Don't get me wrong.
Okay. Say that.
I don't want people to think that, that investigating consciousness and meditation is all nightmares. It isn't. It's a lot of times very joyful and beautiful. And that's the effect it has on you. I'm generally good-humored regardless of what occurs. Even bereavement and stuff. I don't look on it as something to be miserable or sad about. And I know that for as a fact, because of what's things that have occurred in my life. I just don't respond the same way as other people. And a lot of the time I just have to not speak about it because they're not going to get it. They just won't understand. But I genuinely don't feel bothered, and it's not because I don't care. I just don't feel caught up in it. It's just inevitable. Everyone's got to get ill or die. It's just the way it goes, and that is absolutely true. And you've got to learn to come to terms with that. Because what choice have you got? Just as you've got no choice but to be able to deal with your own company. Because what choice have you got? You can't. How can you run away? You can't.
Yeah. Do you think to a certain extent your art has been a process of coming to terms with that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You have to. I've seen things that if I was, when I was in Switzerland, I was married for a while there, and my wife was a psychologist, and she said, genuinely, I don't understand how you're not insane because of what's happened to you and what you've seen, because she was experiencing it firsthand. And she said, there are people in the asylums where I'm working who have seen less than you, and they're incurably mad. And that was something that I discussed with Johnny a lot, because he had a similar outlook. He was like, a lot of what went on in his mind was very horrific and ugly, and he just coped with it by drawing it. But he did have, when he, as far as his illness was concerned, he looked on that. I disagreed with him on that. He looked on that as a punishment for the way he lived, and I was like, no. I said, everyone's made mistakes and done things that they regret, stuff, but you shouldn't really look on it like that. It's just the misfortune of having a body. There might have been things he'd done that contributed to it. I don't know, all of the things that he'd done with his health, but I think it's the wrong way to look at.
I mean, I
an illness.
Did him, I think about 6 months before he died, and we didn't talk about the MS, and he seemed to be joyful.
Yeah, he was a lot of times. He was quite cheerful. He said he'd come to terms with being in the wheelchair. But the reason that he decided to do the Dignitas thing was because it was affecting his eyesight. And he said that will affect my drawing, and that's it. And so I think that's kind of why, he just was like, that's it, enough. It's gone as far as I want it to.
It's a somber point to end on, but it has been such a revelation, and a privilege to be able to spend all this time. And thank you for spending so much time to talk. It's been
that's all right, man.
It's been great. Like I say, I think the effect of your artwork on my perception when I was a teenager was sufficient to definitely make everything worth it. And it's just been fascinating to hear your take on everything. So thank you.
You're welcome, man. like I said, I've got a lot of time for 2000 AD. When I heard it was 2000 AD, I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think they've contributed a lot to England's creativity. Let's put it that way. Well done for working, doing what you're doing as well.
Hey, Tharg is my master. I just do what he does.
I couldn't believe it. I saw that thrillcast. I was like, oh yeah.